Well, it is great to be back for episode 4 of this series with my friend Hannah Aske from TenFour Ministries. We know that children's ministry is really important. We know it can be a lot of fun, but let's be honest, Hannah, it can also be really challenging, can't it?
A little bit.
I have seen you quote James 1 verses 2 and 3. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So today I would love to talk to you about some of the trials of kids ministry. I'd love to hear your solutions and your strategies. And I'd really like to get your insight into how on earth we find joy in the midst of it all. You've mentioned before that burnout can be a really big problem in kids ministry, and the average term for a children's pastor is only about 3 years. So why do you think that is? Why do kids ministers burn out?
I think a lot of people probably go into this job thinking that it's one thing, and then it ends up being something that they completely just don't expect. I've heard stories of primary school teachers who come out and do the ministry thinking, oh yeah, this will be a different job. And then they go back into primary school teaching because it's easier, or they just feel that it's more safer or better for them. And I don't know about you, but I've heard about all the stresses of primary school teaching.
Yeah. I mean, that's not an easy job, is it?
No. For me, I'm like thinking it's one of the most high pressure job of what they have to do, or the hours that they have to work. So then if they're leaving the ministry to go back to teaching, you have to ask the question, why? Like, is it that the job is harder, or is it that they just don't have enough support? But we have to realize that this is a ministry. It's not just a job. It's not babysitting. You know, we're building something, we're doing God's work. And it's not something that you can switch off from. It's something that is just continuous all the time. It's a calling. But within that, there's like loads of blurred lines that not many people see and not many people recognize. And so then it's a case of, like I said, it's not what they expect. So they come into it and it's not what they expect. But let's kind of do some comparison between the two jobs of school and ministry, of what I kind of have recognized a little bit. For schools, you have your normal 5-day a week. You're a Christian, you go to work, you come home, you're tired and exhausted, but at the same time, work is just work. You can kind of just leave it there, because then when on a Sunday you go to church, and you can go to church for a personal experience where you can just be with God and be like, God, what are you saying to me? You know, what are you saying to my life personally? Not a case of my job, but what are you saying personally to me? Whereas in ministry, anybody who's in any form of ministry doesn't necessarily get that unless they purposely ask for that. You have to be really intentional about investing in your own spiritual walk with God, because on a Sunday, if you have a Sunday off, for example, of rota or anything like that, but you still go to your church, it's your place of work, you're still instantly thinking about all the different people that you need to talk to about ministry stuff, not personal stuff. Are you reading the Bible for your own personal walk, or are you reading the Bible to prepare for teaching, sermon? Do you know what I mean? There's all those different things. And because it all kind of comes into that, it ends up being just a little bit blurry. And we're going to talk more about it in the next episode of how we can lead ourselves well. But I think this is quite a problem. What we have to realize is that, yes, we are called to ministry, but we're first called to being sons and daughters of God. You know, we're first called for that first relationship. And that often, especially in my experience of being in ministry and my own personal journey, that often kind of just like takes a sideline. You know, it's like the Hannah, the daughter of God, kind of just gets put to the side, because Hannah, the person who's doing children's ministry and who's serving God and who's working for God, that calling kind of comes first. And it has to be a consistent reminder in my mind and a consistent prayer where I'm like, okay, God, I'm sorry. I'm first your daughter, and going back to that. But yeah, I think that kind of adds to the burnout a little bit as well. Also, teaching, you have a lot of targets to meet, a lot of pressures, a lot of extra hours work, marking, all those different things. But every year they invest in one group of students, for example, don't they? And they have the same curriculum that they've got to teach, especially within primary school teaching, same curriculum that you've got to teach throughout that whole year. You invest in that whole year of those children, and then the next year comes along and you start all over again. But in ministry, I see children once a week for an hour, maybe less than that, sometimes even once a month, generally.
Yeah.
So to see the progress and to see somebody progress in their spiritual faith is a lot harder and frustrating. Whereas
it's harder to quantify as well, isn't it? Like, you don't know. Like, how do you quantify that? You can't really.
Exactly.
And I think there's sometimes a lot of pressure on numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many children have you got? I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean anything, does it?
No. And and those pressures, they come from the church wider as well, don't they? They come from everything else and stuff as well. And so that consistent frustration then will add to the burnout as well. Because then we feel that it's on our part. We feel like we're failing. We feel like we're not getting anywhere. So we're not doing anything. We're not seeing anything progress.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a completely different mindset to where you would be in a job, like a normal workspace, because our partner is God. We can only do so much, and then God's got to take the rest, and God's got to do the rest. We don't have any power over anybody's heart. We don't have any power over anybody's walk with God at all.
Yeah.
Only God has that. So then it's like that release, but also you have to really trust, and you have to have a lot of faith in that, of saying, okay, God, it's over to you. I'm just here to serve.
Yeah.
But, I think it must come down to a lot of support. Like in a school, you'll have support from head teachers, assistant head teachers, all those different people and stuff that have already been put in for a really good structure. There's accountability, there's training, there's investment. We don't see that in the church, but a children's worker should have just as much investment as the senior minister. And I'm not sure if that really happens.
I don't think that happens.
No, it's like the senior minister might go to all these different conferences and all those different things because they're able to. Is the children's minister allowed to go to all those different things? Do they have that investment?
Yeah. Do you think there's a feeling amongst children's ministers generally that they have to do everything themselves? Like, I'm thinking about the training, and perhaps they say, I can't go to that training because I'm needed on a Sunday. Do they feel like they've got to do it all?
Absolutely. And I think more so for paid workers than it is for volunteers, but definitely still for volunteers as well, especially if you've got like the lead position. But with paid workers, more often or not, they've been a volunteer before. And then what happens is there's guilt to then ask somebody else to do it because they're not getting paid. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm getting paid for this now, so therefore I should be doing this, this, and this, and relieve some of the people who are giving up their time. But if you're all a team of volunteers, then there's no guilt there because you can kind of spread the load a little bit. This is not necessarily self-inflicted guilt. I think this guilt comes from congregation members, church pressures, all these different types of things, and people just feeding into it a little bit. I've heard some really, really bad stories, Joe, like of where somebody has actually gone up to a children's worker and said, I'm the one paying your wage. And it's like, yeah, do you know what I mean? It's like,
ouch.
So yes, this is the thing about church structure, is that everybody within the congregation, they tithe, they give into the church, they specifically give towards a job role or something like that, because within the church you're all like, we want to hire a children's worker, so we need more giving, give us your money. And so then these people in the congregation are like, oh, right, okay, well, I'm paying you a wage now, so therefore I
Yeah.
am the person. And then instantly there's this pressure to perform and pressure to do everything perfectly because everybody's looking at you. And so then you feel, yeah, I have to do everything myself. I have to overperform. I have to do everything. But this is what I'm talking about, the blurred lines. It's just a little bit like things that people don't necessarily see. What I said to the children's worker who told me that, I said, what you need to say to him is, thank you for blessing me so well, but at the same time, not actually think that he's the one blessing you. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like being really polite and graceful to that person and saying, thank you so much, you know, for everything that you're giving, but actually not let that sink in, because ultimately he doesn't pay your wage, the church pays the wage. There's definitely a different attitude towards paid and voluntary,
Hmm.
because I see that all the time in terms of if I'm leading a group of volunteers or trying to raise up young leaders or trying to raise up interns or anything like that, you know, you can ask them to do something and then they'll complain or something like that about it. And then you say, well, I have to do this, this, and this, and this. And they go, yeah, but you're paid for that. Ultimately, for me, I see it as if I wasn't being paid, I would still be doing everything that I'm asking that person to do. But the payment is not necessarily just so that I'm being paid for it. It's more that I'm being blessed so that I'm being released from a normal 9 to 5 job so that I can give my whole
Mm.
heart to this ministry, that I can give
Yeah,
all.
that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing, like you have to give your whole heart to something, your whole heart, your whole focus. If I had another job that was throughout the week, then I would be giving that a lot of focus and not the ministry. So actually the money that I get paid for doing ministry is a blessing to release me to think more about the ministry. But that doesn't mean that I can't then ask somebody else to do something. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to raise young leaders or raise any type of leader, because, you know, it's, for me, it's about seeing the importance and the gifting within that person and releasing them. That is just as important as me doing it myself. Actually
Yeah,
is
and
more
actually, your
important.
role, that's part of your job. Like, that is part of what you're being paid for, is to
Mhm,
lead a team. You are the children's ministry leader, so therefore
mhm,
you are leading a team of people. It's not just about pouring into kids and doing the
exactly.
lessons and getting to know families. That is a huge chunk of it, obviously. But yeah, I think recognizing that raising leaders is part of your job
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about seeing them grow in their gifting, because
Mm.
they may fight back at first, but later on they'll thank you for it. Do you know what I mean?
I love that
They may
attitude.
still
They
be
may
upset.
fight back. That's so funny.
Later on, they'll literally just be like, I'm really thankful that you invested time and gave me that opportunity. And you just want to say, I told you so back then, but you don't,
Yeah.
because we're loving and
Yeah.
graceful, you know. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's one of those things that you really have to be really confident in the calling that you have, the what you have, and the mindset that you have over your paid job, knowing that it's not all on you, it's all on the team. We're all in this together. And if you completely change your language and making sure that that is the culture that you set, then everybody else will kind of fall into that. But I mean, no wonder there is burnout. With all those different comments feeding into our
Yeah.
minds all the time, unless you have that, it's like we have to have an extra layer of thick skin that's still
Yeah.
loving and graceful and not bitter, but like that extra layer of thick skin that's not going to allow that stuff to happen, but to have the truth in our hearts. You kind of have to be a little bit tough. So knowing the right words to say to different people, however they challenge you, and knowing that it's not going to affect you and your calling and where you are with God. I think that is the most important thing, is just knowing how to respond and knowing that it's okay to respond in that way. I think a lot of people think, oh, I can't respond in that way. You know, I need to just do harder work. I need to do more work. I need to, no, rest, God didn't give us the job so that we could burn out. God gave it so that we could, speak life into other people and see children and young people come to know Jesus.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
blessed us with that job. He anointed us with that job, not for burnout, but to just be a light to the world. So yeah, we have to remember that and what God's called us to do.
Yeah. Let's talk about recruiting volunteers,
Woohoo.
because well, I feel like the problem of not having enough volunteers is one that kind of resonates globally. Like I see this on forums all the time. People are kind of like all over the world. People are saying, "How do I get more volunteers?" So, talk to me about a time when you've been stuck for volunteers, because I know it's happened.
Consistently, all the time. Yeah, you're right. Every single conference we go to or anything like that, when I'm sat on national teams and we ask all the children's workers, what's your biggest challenge? Volunteers all the time, recruiting volunteers, how do you keep volunteers, all those different things. So I've had lots of different experiences and it changes all the time. And it's a consistent problem and consistent creative strategies, which we've already talked about in terms of creative strategies. But like in my first church that I worked at, it wasn't a massive issue. Sometimes it was a little bit tricky on a Friday night on a midweek group where we needed more team. But on our Sundays, it was quite a small group, like we had less than 10 children. So it was quite easy to manage. But now I'm in a church where we have 3 different age groups and I need then 7 volunteers to cover all those 3 different age groups. And 3 of those adults need to be able to teach and lead a session. So it's a lot harder. And then all of those people also only want to be on once a month. So then it's like, that's 28 volunteers that I need every single month, which is a lot of volunteers, a lot of people to manage. And then when it comes to their day of the month and then they can't make it, and then you're calling on somebody else who's already been on that month, or it's the people that then serve on multiple teams. So you're navigating, right, okay, when are you on worship team? Okay, you're on worship team that week. Can you be on kids team this week? And all those different things. And I have sometimes the people that will come out, they'll do worship, and then they'll come straight out to doing kids team because they're so dedicated in that way. But I have to try and protect them from that. So I want more volunteers. I always give advice to recruit 3 to 4 times a year, because when somebody just drops out, they kind of drop out all of a sudden. And it takes a lot longer to recruit, to make sure that they've all got their DBS check, to make sure
that's the thing, isn't it? There's so many hoops to jump through with volunteering for kids. When I feel like in any other volunteering capacity in the church, you can just you need someone to be on the welcome team, they can just join the welcome team.
Yeah,
they haven't got to get government approval for that.
No, but we have to do all those different things in terms of recruitment.
And that's really important. It is really important to do all those things, but it just makes it take a long time, doesn't it?
It does. So then if you think about it in terms of weeks, you've got quite a few weeks where you're waiting for that person's DBS check to come through and they still can't be on team, and you've got that one person who's just dropped out all of a sudden. So it's really hard. So then if somebody drops out, you've at least got somebody, even if they're not on team all the time, at least you've been recruiting. But then if somebody who wants to lead a session drops out, it's even harder, because first off, when you ask somebody to come and be on team, a lot of the time they're not very confident. They're like, I don't really do kids. And then you get them in for a few weeks, but if they're only on once a month, then that takes them few months to get comfortable with being on team. And then it takes them even more longer to get to the point where they're confident to lead a session. But yeah, last September, I lost 5 volunteers, and 3 of which were the people who were leading sessions. So I was a bit of a sticky situation then. But what I did then was, for the first half term, I did once a month, I did all together sessions. So we got all the children of every age group together in one room. And that meant that I didn't need 7 volunteers. I just needed 5, including myself, so that I had just enough in the room. But then also I didn't need any other leaders. I just needed me leading, because I can do that, but like, and I could put it all on myself, and that's fine. And actually that strategy has seen so much growth within our children that we've continued to do that for the next half term as well. Even though I've got enough team now all trained up, I've still kept that because we're focusing more on prayer and worship and building relationships together. And so it's harder because you have like the little 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds and then the 10-year-olds all in the same room. But the younger kids are just like loving life, and the older kids are like, you've just got to use them to kind of say, hey, why don't you lead the younger ones, and just build up that with them. So there's so many different creative strategies that you could do. I've heard some people actually say to the church, we're going to have to close our small session, our 3 to 5 session, because we have no volunteers. And all of a sudden, when they have to say that, all of a sudden people then go, I'll volunteer. It's like, I asked you before and you just said no, but now all of a sudden you're going to volunteer.
It feels like the wrong way to go about it, really, doesn't it? That we have to do that. I mean, I've been in churches where we've put a cap on numbers in the kids group, so that when families turn up, they're like, sorry, we haven't got space for your children. And then suddenly the parents start thinking differently. But it's not ideal, is it? It's not the best way to do it, really. What is the worst excuse you've ever heard for not volunteering?
You're so naughty. I mean, there's always something, and generally I can't remember all of the excuses, but actually recently I have had one. A person said to me, I don't feel I can volunteer because my son will get jealous of me looking after the other children.
Seriously, that's amazing.
And I'm like, maybe you just need to have a chat with your son, about about what needs to happen. Your child can cope with that. I'm sure we have other parents that work within the session, and
that is incredible. I knew there'd be a good one. Be a good one in those two. That's why I had to ask that question.
Exactly. So it's one of those things. So there's always a lot of reasons, and to them it would seem really quite genuine, wouldn't it? Like, it'll be a consistent, it will be something that they feel that is really genuine. But for me, it's more of a case of like, let's show them the possibilities of how they can actually still volunteer, even though that is an issue. So for me, talking to her was like, well, I have this parent and she has her kids in the session, and there was a little bit of tension at first and stuff, the children would get a little bit upset at different things, but she's really worked through it with her children. Maybe you should talk to her and see how she's managed it, and then speak life into them and say, you can do this. You're a great person to be on team. There's a reason why I'm coming to ask you. It's not just because of, I felt like it. There's a reason for it. So, it's encouraging them to see a little bit further.
What do you think is the best approach for encouraging volunteers then? Do we do a shout out from the front, or do we have a quiet conversation with them? How do you go about things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. Absolutely both. Because the shout out from the front prepares the hearts, but the quiet conversation seals the deal.
Nice.
It's the shout out from the front is where you share the vision. You can tell them all those different things that you're doing, all the big stories of how your children's ministry is going, what you want to see happen, and how they can be a part of it. And this is the moment where they sit there and they listen and they go, oh, yeah, I could do that. But then the doubt hits in of, actually, no, I can't do that. I don't have anything to offer. I'm not good with kids. My son's going to get jealous. Or, do you know what I mean? All those different like excuses all of a sudden start to fit in, so that then they don't actually come to you, because even though they've had that prompt in, they have also got a lot of excuses. And so the quiet conversation where you can actually go and approach somebody and talk to them. And then you just eliminate all those excuses by telling them how they would fit into your ministry. So yeah, what I would say to any children's minister is, on your Sundays off, like
as if you have one,
you never have one, but on your Sundays when you are not on team, use that opportunity to really ask God, who are you asking me to speak to? Who is going to be good on our team? God will highlight that person to you, and you will go and speak to that person. And yeah, it will probably be the person that they least expect, but at the same time, God will still highlight that person. Because let's be honest, I'm going to ask you, Jo, actually. Right.
Okay.
If you were to stereotype a children's worker, if you were looking out in your congregation, who would be the person that you would look to and think, oh yeah, that person would be, what would they look like? What would be the stereotype children's worker?
Okay. Well, you've really put me on the spot now, haven't you? And yeah, this is going to sound awful, but honestly, I would probably look at the women first.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a bit of a cultural thing. I think generally speaking, kids' work is considered to be done by women, like even in like primary schools, then it's still majority female teachers, isn't it? And I certainly have heard of some church cultures where they label children's ministry as women's work. So yeah, my stereotype, when we're going down stereotypes road, would definitely be female, possibly a mum. Like I probably expect them to have children of their own, whether they are small children or older children. I wouldn't expect a single woman who's never had children to do it.
I'm single, not had children.
I know. And I've got other friends in the same position who also love doing children's ministry. So I'm feeling really bad about all of those stereotypes now.
But it is generally the stereotype that we all go for. Like, as soon as you look out, especially when the women one, like, I'll look out across my church and the first sight that I would think of is what parents, and you don't generally look for parents who have young children. So like 2 and 3-year-olds or babies or anything like that.
Frankly, they're busy enough, aren't they?
They're busy enough. You wouldn't ask. So you would ask a parent who has got children probably who are 5 to 10 or teenagers, somebody who's kind of gone through that. Or you would ask, I would still ask the single people who would they don't have any other pressures. So like you can ask a lot of those people. Somebody who's got experience working with children.
I think a lot of people think that you have to have had some kind of teaching experience, which is absolutely not true because I have not. I'm not saying I'm the best volunteer in the world, but I think I do all right, and I've never had any teaching experience. And sometimes I think perhaps even teaching experience can trip you up a little bit because perhaps you go into it with a classroom mentality. In church, I always talk about it as we're kind of walking the tightrope between school and a kid's party. It's like it's meant to be fun, and it's not meant to feel like school. So
you would also look for the different types of energy that somebody holds as well. Like, are they really confident person, or like, would you generally go to talk to the person who's quite shy and quiet, that doesn't really bring a lot of energy? Would you go and ask those people? And I would say actually yes, because I was quite a quiet person when I first started in ministry. I needed to have somebody see something in me that grew my confidence. And last year I had an intern with us who was really not confident in herself in any way, shape or form. And by the end of the year, she was so confident. She was like teaching, she was growing in herself. It was a case of just consistent investment and seeing something in her that then helped her grow to be an incredible children's worker. That the other day I just said to her, I'm going to pass on my job to her. But she was like, no, you can't. So I was like, no, don't worry, I won't speak it over you. But I kind of like, little nudge, type thing. But it's incredible to see somebody grow. And so you've also got to think, what about the men, And there's some young lads probably in your ministry that could do with a really good, strong male role model. And I have to say, so my male leaders in my children's ministry are so fantastic. And I won't be able to do it without them, because seeing what they offer is completely different. So I'm always on the lookout for male leaders who can kind of lead our children's ministry now. People who are also like, let's say 60 plus, where they feel I'm too tired for that. But actually, let's think children need grandparents. Children need spiritual grandparents that are there to, show them some love and some care. They may not be the vibrant ones or anything like that, but actually, what about the children who really struggle with all that high energy? They need somebody who's quite nurturing and caring for them, that could sit on the sidelines and just be with them. And what about older teenagers? How are we leading them and helping them to be a part of something and helping them grow? All these different people that we've actually got to open our eyes up to, other than the general stereotype, because actually we are all the body of Christ. We all have something to offer. We all have different giftings, and they are all needed within children's ministry. But you need to really ask the Spirit to lead you when you're recruiting volunteers, of saying, God, who is it that you are leading me to speak to? It may be somebody who's really unexpected, but God will use that person within your ministry, and it will help grow your ministry to amazing places that you've never imagined. So yeah, I would say look beyond the stereotype.
Yes, definitely. So good. So we spoke in episode 2 about the importance of church culture and of supportive leadership as well. But I know there's definitely going to be people listening to this who are probably struggling right now with senior leaders who just don't get it. So I wonder, what are your top tips for getting more support from your leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I've had this taught quite a lot in different situations and things. It's called leading up well. But yeah, just book in for regular line management meetings. Like if your leader is not being intentional in booking in meetings, you need to then book in meetings and make sure that they are very regular. So some people can cope with a monthly meeting. Some people need more than that because there's a lot more to work on. It really depends on how healthy your ministry is, I think. If your ministry is in a healthy place, then, monthly, good. But if you're building something and you require leadership to come alongside you, then you need it to be weekly or bi-weekly for that beginning bit. But I'd say when you're doing that as well, prepare for those meetings really well. Have your list of needs. Yes, absolutely. All those list of things that you want to work through and have help with. But don't just use those meetings for a list of needs. Use those meetings to actually speak to them about stories that are going on with your ministry. Help your leaders to really grasp the vision and grasp what is actually happening within there. Because for the leaders, they're fine. The kids are shut out. They're in the back room. That's fine. They're doing their ministry part with the rest of the congregation. They're not necessarily bothered, but actually they need to know what's happening back there is just as important as what's happening in the church. And so you need to kind of bring them alongside that. Tell them stories of celebration. Tell them stories of how a child is actively growing within their spiritual walk. Really say, like, I saw this child, they prayed for the whole group of children, just simple little things of what you have seen, and then speak that into the church leadership as well, not just the senior minister, but actually try and get time with the senior leadership team, get them all on board, really share heart, share vision, and use that as the majority of your time that is speaking out, because they need to grasp it as well. If we just say, yeah, it was good, they're not really going to get it. Like, really think specifically and think that maybe a child praying isn't such a big deal, but actually it's a huge deal. That child is growing in their spiritual faith, so that, like, let's say, yeah, this child just prayed over everybody. This child read out of the Bible. It's all those little things that are actually big things in a child's journey. So
Yeah.
yeah, really take time for that. And I would also be really cheeky and ask the senior minister to come into some of our sessions, and lead a session or something like that, and see if that was be a possibility. Because I think the senior minister would willingly go into a youth session and do like a grill
Yeah.
the pastor situation type thing,
Yeah.
they would do that. Well, why doesn't that happen within the children's ministry as well? Like, why can't the children ask the minister a question and all those different things? What you don't want is children growing up in church not knowing who the senior minister is.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's
But
what
you
it
can
is.
just get them in for a chat, couldn't you? You can just get them
Exactly.
in. Like, we're talking about this topic this week. Can you share a story with the children?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Help them to recognize you and build relationships with you as well, and just help the minister to see that the children are so much more important than what they see, I guess, in some ways. Because you can't just get them to get it, you have to invite
yeah.
them to be a part of the journey, and change their hearts. So really pray into it, ask God about it, and just, yeah, take some time with that. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Really good
Yeah.
advice. Of course it is. So TenFour Ministries offers a variety of training programs as well for children's ministry. What would you say are the benefits of intentional training like that?
Yeah, I mean, throughout this podcast, we've talked through all the different pressures that children's ministers face all the time. All the different opinions, all the different challenges, all those different things. Training and coming with alongside other children's workers, it helps to know that somebody else is going through that as well. Like, it helps because you can often feel that this is just happening to you. Like, this is like the only thing that's happening. And you're all on your own. But actually it helps a lot to know that somebody else has been there, or that they're actually going through exactly the same problem. You can bounce ideas off each other, like, what's worked for you? What's not worked? All those different things. So that is something that training offers. But also training offers the whole thing of just eliminating all those pressures of perfect. More often or not, when I'm doing consultancy and training, I am just really real and authentic with everybody, of just saying, it's okay. I spend most of my consultancy sessions going, it's okay. You're doing great. All those encouraging things that kind of just lets them off the hook, because more often than not, they come to me with like, I've got to get this done. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do, and I'm like, chill. It's fine. We're all in this together. Let's not think too much of pressure on yourself. Actually, you're doing a great job, and just encouraging them with that. So yeah, I think it's really important just to have that support base first, but also knowing that, like we said before, in terms of the comparison of teachers and children's workers, teachers have regular training anyway. They're always having teacher training days. They'll have extra courses and study. They'll have appraisals. Some of the teachers probably think they don't need that, but they still have that all the time, because the head teachers will invest in their teachers because they want them to be better at their job. They want them to do well at their job. They want them to succeed, and they want them to know that they are valued for the work that they do. As children's workers, we shouldn't be just having to run a ministry just to get through things. We should be running it to be excellent and honoring to God. And we need training like, what is Generation Alpha all about, and how can we best serve them? Behavior management, that is like one of those, another big challenge that everybody is having to face. And how can we get training on that? How can we get training of how to manage behavior? How can we get training on how to be all inclusive and look after those children with special educational needs, in a real way that helps them feel valued? All of these things, as children's ministers, we're supposed to just know. We're just expected to just know. That's it. Like, just get through. You only have to get through an hour. So That's fine. Like, you can manage it, I'm sure. Yeah, the children's behavior may be all over the place, but you only have to get on with it for an hour and then you're fine. We need to be doing better. We need to be raising the standards. So, yeah, my heart plea for church ministers is to please just invest in training your workers and volunteers, because otherwise you will see so much burnout. You will see so much where they just feel ill-equipped. They don't feel that they can do it, feel like they're failing. We need to raise the standard and invest in our children's workers if we want them to continue further than just that 3-year stint. Because I've been working in my current church that I'm working in right now for 3 years, and I feel like I've only just got it to a place where it's a healthy ministry status, and that's taken a lot of work, a lot of hard work. If I was to leave right now, the momentum, everything would just go, it would just fall flat.
Yeah.
Because it's not that I haven't raised a team that could be able to maintain it, but you always need a lead person to be able to drive things forward, to take the vision forward. And it will just disappear, because with burnout, that means you're a person that leaves very quickly. You're not a person that gives 6 months notice or whatever like that to build something, you leave very quickly. And so then within that process of time of when you're trying to recruit a new children's worker, everything's just slowly gone downhill. And then the person who comes back in has to start all the way from scratch again. And in that moment, when they're starting from scratch, how many children and young people have you lost along the way? We need to be investing properly and helping our children's workers feel valued and encouraged so that they can keep running the race, that they can keep going through all those trials, that they can keep finding their joy, because finding joy can be really, really hard when you're feeling so challenged. So, yeah, really, really invest. It's my heart, Jo.
I can see. So, it's in the interest, isn't it, of the senior leadership to support their children's ministers, to offer them training or give them opportunities to experience training or go to conferences or just be refreshed in that way. Because otherwise they're going to find themselves with a gap. Suddenly the children's worker goes, I can't do this anymore. I'm off.
Yeah.
And then you've got a gap, and no one wants that. Yeah. So there's a lot to plow in, isn't there? But it's so worth it.
Yeah, there is. And I think you've got to kind of ask a minister, as they're leading a church as well, they're leading a ministry just as much as a children's minister is leading a ministry. So as the minister, if you burn out and if you just saw everything fall apart, how would you feel about that ministry that you've left? God said, build your church, you want to see it grow. So I would just say, whatever a minister is going through and whatever investment they see that they need in their lives, make sure that your children's minister is having that exact same investment, make sure that your youth minister is having that same investment as you are, because they're going through exactly the same thing as you. So,
are there more training opportunities for youth ministry than for kids ministry, would you say?
Yes. In terms of degrees as well, absolutely. It was really hard for me, especially when I was doing mine, to try and find somebody who did children's work as a degree with applied theology, especially within theology degrees. It's always youth work. So in terms of that level, yes. And in terms of children's ministry and youth ministry, I think there's only one conference that we know of for children's ministry.
Certainly in the UK.
Which is hand in hand. Whereas youth ministry, you have the youth ministry conference. It's just a massive thing that everybody goes to.
Yeah. So I wonder why that is. I wonder why the focus is on youth more than kids. Is it? Do you think it's just because kids kind of have to come to church because their parents are coming? Is that the logic?
Maybe. I have no idea, because
I'm sorry, I'm just throwing all these questions at you. It's just where my brain's going.
No, but it does blow your mind, doesn't it? Of
Yeah.
asking those questions of why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
And people are starting to wake up to it a little bit more, I think. I don't know what the barriers are in stopping that from happening. I would love to be like, yep, let's push past that. Maybe I should start up my own degree, like just be.
Yeah, why not? Just add it to the list of things that you already do.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great to talk through all these things, Hannah. Next time, we're going to talk about a bit more about what children's ministers can do for themselves personally, I think, because there is a personal responsibility there as well. So I'm really looking forward to that episode. But thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today, for all your stories. And look forward to chatting to you again soon.
See you later.